Welcome to our continuing series, Interviews with Aurovilians. And today we're very fortunate to have B with us. B is a very interesting name. Can you give us a little bit of the history of it?
Oh, sure. Of course, I wasn't always B. I didn't come to Oroville with that name. I came to Oroville with the name Bill. And what happened to me was I realized that a lot of what had to happen, because when I arrived in Oroville, I was disappointed. I expected a little bit more to be there. And there we were camping in the desert, as you know so well. So I understood that the change has to come from within. It really has to come from within. And so my name at that time was Bill. So I just took the ill out of Bill, and then I could just be. So that really helped me. But you know, I couldn't tell people about that for a very, very long time because it was slightly embarrassing, and it didn't. Well, finally, I announced it in the News and Notes in Oroville, and then people came up to me and they were laughing, and they said, "That was the best joke I ever read." Because, you know, people are always changing their names in Oroville, and they take these wonderful Sanskrit names, but you were making fun of all of them. And I said, no, I'm not making fun of anybody.
Not at all.
No, I said, this is serious.
I got rid of the ill.
I got rid of the ill. So it took a long time for people to really start calling me B. There were some stubborn people who still call me Bill. Because they said, well, we first knew you as Bill and you will always be Bill. But no, but I am B. Because fortunately things happened, you know, that I could change. And that's of course what it's all about, our whole story, the transformation.
So B, how did you first hear of Sri Aurobindo and Mother? And how old were you?
At that time, I was around 30, and I was teaching in Los Angeles in a small college, Marymount Palos Verdes College. And a student of mine asked me about Sri Aurobindo. And I said, you know, Sri who? I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea. But from the way he asked the question, I knew that this was somebody important. So I called up a friend of mine at UCLA, and I said, who is Sri Aurobindo? And this guy says to me, oh my God, you don't know Sri Aurobindo? You're over there teaching. I was teaching some Eastern religious disciplines and some things like that. And he said, you have to educate yourself fast. So I did. And he recommended a magazine. It was called Cross Currents, and it was edited by Robert McDermott. And then he wrote this book, The Essential Aurobindo.
Right.
So I think these were his notes for that book. And he was the editor of that journal, and he published in 1972, because it was Sri Aurobindo centenary year, a whole issue of that magazine just on Sri Aurobindo. And he went through all of Sri Aurobindo's works. He did, a synopsis of these various things. He also, at the end of that, he wrote an article on Oroville. And he said, you know, they're taking this evolutionary philosophy and they're going to build a city in South India. And I read this and I was, oh my God, you know, I was very, very impressed. And when I had read, his synopsis of Sri Aurobindo's works and his contributions, then I started checking it on my own. So immediately I wanted to meet somebody who was an expert in this, and so I went to the East-West Cultural Center, and there was, as you know, Jyoti Priya, Dr. Judith Tyberg.
And what year was this?
This was 1973, must have been 73, end of 73. And when I met her, and of course she had met Sri Aurobindo, and I asked her all my questions, and I mean, she was a mystic in her own right, of course, and I was deeply impressed by her. and we went through Savitri. We went through a part of Savitri. She introduced me to Savitri, and I said, there's no question about it. I have to go to Oroville. And she said, sure. She said, and I know somebody who can help you go there. And she said, her name is June Mayer, and she's in Santa Cruz in the Oroville, or Aptos in the Oroville Association, and you just phone her. She will arrange everything. So I did. And that's how it happened. But then it didn't happen the way I thought, because I was doing at that time some film work. So I thought, I'll make a film on Oroville. So I contacted a company on the East Coast. It was called New Age Films. And I said, I'm a filmmaker and this and that. And I thought that Oroville is something really significant. Should make a film about it. And they got very excited, and they said, yes, we wanted to go to Oroville, and actually we had been planning, but we hadn't been able. And now that you're here and you can put it together, we'll make a contract and go. So it was perfect. So just before we left, they phoned me up and they say, we've got a deal in Bali. In Bali, they're walking on the fire, and they're going into these trance states. And we have an arrangement where we can film all this. So we go to Bali first, and then after we go to Oroville. He said, you come with us to Bali, we make this Bali film. So then I was like, oh no, what do I do now? But that's the time, when you really have to make these hard decisions, because who wouldn't want to go to Bali, So I said, let me think about it, but I knew I had to go to Oroville. I had to turn him down. I said no. I said, I'm going to Oroville. And so I came here by myself. And because it was just so clear, that I had to do it. And I knew inside, if I went to Bali, my life would go in a totally different way. But
that was clear to you.
It was absolutely clear. And then, as I said, though, when I got to Oroville, I was a little disappointed, because I thought there would be more here, and
there wasn't much.
There wasn't much, that's for sure. And so then I had to do some of this inner work. That's how we had to get the ill out of Bill. And but strangely, another thing happened even before I came, because I told June Mayer about this. I said, I was ready to go, and then this film company, and I told her the story. And she said, oh, no. She said, wait a minute, there's another man in Canada. He wants to go to Oroville, and he wants to move his film studio and printing press to Oroville. And you go see him.
Oh.
So I thought, this is great. This might be even better. So then I went to Canada.
Oh.
And I met this man, and he had been influenced by A.B. Pirani, who gave lectures in the U.S. He went on a lecture tour, I think must have been in the late 60s.
No, I think it was 62 when I met him.
Oh, okay. So,
and
it was
Arizona,
yeah,
and in Los Angeles.
Okay, so that's when this man met him and his wife, and they heard about the integral education. So what they wanted to do then was form an educational project in which they would raise a supermental child. So they called their child, the project, Future Child. And so they went to Canada, and then they had this organic farm, and he had this studio and all this. So he started making films on special nutrition, don't eat junk food, all that kind of films he was making, and printing little booklets. But then they decided to conceive this future child. So they did this conscious conception. This child was born, and they named her Satri from Savitri. Mm-hmm. They just modified the name a bit. Mm-hmm. And so I called him. I went there. I met Satri. This little one was 3 years old. Like the most unbelievable ideal child. Very strong, beautiful, totally articulate. She was working out on these some of these gymnastic things she was doing. Unbelievable, working these little tape recorders they had in those days. She was only 3 years old. And So I was very impressed. So he said, okay, you go to Oroville, you check it out, and then we come. We bring everything. Satri and the printing press and everything. So
Can you share his name or his
yeah, Horst. His name was Horst
Horst.
Baume,
Okay.
and he was originally from Germany. His wife was from California, I think, and they had met, I think, in Berkeley or somewhere, and he had some amazing adventures, prior to that, and he was really intent on this project. So I thought that was great. So when I got to Oroville, I started looking around, to see if this was possible. But
Where?
I mean, we had Fillmore, and there was a wind-up Bolex camera that Michelle Klosterman was using. And that was the limit of the, and where to have an air-conditioned place, where the cleanliness, soundproof, but the biggest obstacle I discovered was the import laws of India at that time. So he had this beautiful camera with this Angenoux lens, and it was like a $10,000 camera. To bring that into India, he would have to pay 100% duty. The total cost of the film he would have to give at the customs. And of course that was impossible.
Yeah.
So I told him the conditions here. I said, it would be great if you come, but it's not going to be easy, and then you have and to bring a printing press in, you would still have to pay the duty on it. So then he said, I said, you come, you have a look, and then together we'll see. So he came.
Oh.
He came to Oroville, and he looked around, he said, yeah, I don't think I can do it now.
Yeah.
We have to wait. But then he went back, and a tragedy happened. There was a forest fire. He lost everything. The Canadian Forest Service was cleaning some brush, and the fire got out of control, ruined his farm, burned up his studio, burned everything. And then the government wouldn't pay. He had to go to court to fight, to get money, to rebuild his farm. So then he worked like mad to do that, and he got lead poisoning from the paint when he was painting his new buildings, was in the hospital, was dying. He sends me a letter in Oroville. He says, you come and you take Satri. She belongs in Oroville. So at that time I was living with Tina in Oro Green, and I said, look, there's a ready-made supramental child. Are you ready? Do we take this child? And she said, sure, we'll take that child. And so I wrote to him, okay, send her. But then what happened was, he was in his hospital room, in the bed, and he told him to put a picture of Mother on the wall. And he looked at that picture and he's lying there and he's dying. And he said to Mother, if you have some more work for me to do, you have to cure me, because otherwise I'm going to die. And he got better. And his wife got better also, because she also had the poison.
Oh my goodness.
They both survived. But then, the intensity of the work and all this, they got divorced. So then he tried to rebuild the farm, and he died. He did die. And Satri was with her mother, and Satri and her mother, I have lost contact. So maybe I have this feeling someday in Oroville, this woman's going to come up to me and say, my name is Satri, and you knew my father.
We have 8,000 visitors a month. She might catch it through this interview.
So those are things, I mean,
Sure.
that's just one story. So then I did come without, I mean, I was here, so I stayed and.
I never heard from Satri again either.
No, Satri.
Interesting.
Actually, I did get in contact with her mother later, many years later. She told me Satri had become a dancer, and she had worked in Vancouver in a food co-op. She was managing a food co-op. So then I asked some friends, from Vancouver, can you find Satri? But they couldn't find her. So.
Well, tell us about the evolution of your work in Oroville, because this is very interesting.
Well, the evolution of my work is tied to your work, because, maybe people don't know, but, when I arrived in Oroville, my first place was the Matrimandir Nursery, and there was Narad, so welcoming and so knowledgeable about plants, and it changed my life, you know, to get into this, the Matrimandir Gardens. And then we had so many adventures going around India to collect seeds. We would go to the botanical garden in Lawbag in Bangalore
Yes.
with our big bags and collect everything possible and come back and plant. And then we had our production going because we had to plant 2 million trees. And in the nursery we had that, you know, we had that really assembly line production.
And we were giving to the Greenbelt.
Everywhere.
So many-
Everybody in Oroville was getting trees from us. See,
Yes.
the idea was to do the gardens, but you know, the garden situation was we couldn't do it because they said we'll do the construction first, gardens later.
Right.
And so we planted a few trees around, which are there now, but mostly and then of course we were involved in the construction. And what happened to me was I moved to the Matrimandir workers camp and went full-time into construction after a couple of years because
Where we had lived previously in the camp.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Jack and Mary were there.
yeah, of course.
Oh, yes.
I was the babysitter for little Satyavan, you know, and now he's back in Oroville with his wife and his 2 children.
Oh,
So, I mean, generations are going by. And of course, Shally was there in the nursery with us, this little girl running around picking the flowers and having a great time. And now she's, you know, one of the administrators of Oroville.
yeah.
So, I mean, that's the great thing, you know, about a little bit of longevity is that you can look back and you can see the work, you know, the grace and how it happened. And you can see that everything worked out actually perfectly, even though we had a horrendous period there in the 70s with you know, Sri Aurobindo Society and that whole
Oh,
conflict.
Yes.
And I remember you lying on the ground, beat up, and the nursery worker Sundramurti coming, you know, and carrying you into the nursery, and Ramaswamy from the society had this knife against my chest. I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you, you know. Of course, I knew he wasn't going to kill me, but our friend David Wickenden almost got killed because they had
I
that.
brought David back and gave him to you.
Well, you know, there was that RSS guy there, you know, was a fanatic. David was lying on the ground
Yeah.
unconscious. They
They
were
were
still
beating
beating him. We had to scream at Prabhat, you know, the blood of this guy is going to be on your whole family. I mean, it was so dramatic. I mean, you couldn't even make a movie this dramatic, you know.
Really.
And that trauma, you know, I mean, of course, Oroville has had a lot to go through to get over that, but it's all changing now, which is good. I mean, we're acknowledging this, but there's still remnants of that story. But it was
Oh yes.
a tough
People
time.
still tell me
Still
their experiences.
still happening. But it's
Oh.
of course getting better, and we had such a wonderful time there in the nursery. We had Liska, this old Dutch lady, who they first refused. They said, "No, you can't come to Oroville. You're too old." And that woman worked until she was over 90. She worked every day.
Every
She was the one with the green thumb. You know, I was doing the seedling plants, but you had to take those little seedlings and put them in the plastic bag. Well, we would give it to some volunteers. Half would die.
Oh yeah.
With Liska, not one would die.
That one. Yeah.
Every single one, you know, conscientiously every day, Sundays included, planting those. That's how we got the 2 million
And
people
she-
like her.
2 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, over.
Over 2
They
million. Yeah.
estimated
And
now
she
over.
always gave when we needed financial help.
Yeah, because
She had a small pension,
Yeah.
and yet she gave from it.
Well, that small pension, I mean, it did so much.
It
did
did.
so much, and our house
Oh.
is still there. Everything.
Yes.
So much. Yeah, those were just amazing times. And you know, today some people, you know, romanticize a little about those times, but today is also very special. And the young people today in Oroville are absolutely amazing. You know, I have a godchild there, Bhakti. You know, she's 30 now. Incredible, you know. And you have Aditi, you know, Srimoyi's daughter, and Surya Mai, Peter and Nicole's daughter. These young people, you know, they're not so young anymore. They're already 30. They're going to make this Oroville happen.
Yes.
I mean, we had 50 years that were a little tough, but the next 50 years is going to blossom like anything.
I spent last night with Prem Shakti and her daughter and son,
Yeah.
and she was saying the same thing. How she
Exactly.
sees so much in these young people.
Oh my God, it's that's so heartening, to us because, I remember working on the ramp at Matra Mandir, and are we going to be able to finish this thing? Are we going to be able to make that Matra Mandir happen? Because we were short, we didn't have the funds, and conditions didn't look so good, and then we used to calculate how long it would take us to finish certain jobs, and sometimes it was like 20 years or something just to get this particular thing going. And in fact, what happened to me this morning? It was very strange. This morning I was in Matra Mandir, and I'm looking at the crystal, the crystal sitting on those 4 Sri Aurobindo symbols, and suddenly I saw what happened back when we had first made the floor, and there was a rusty pipe, a short rusty pipe, right there where the crystal is, because that's the very center of the Matra Mandir. This pipe was there, and it had a piece of wood in the top with a nail in it and a wire coming out of it. That was how we built the Matra Mandir. That was the measurement. We went from that center with that wire out to make it all circular, perfect. So one day, just as we were finishing work, I looked over there and the pipe was gone. And I rushed over, and I got, Francis was there and Gerard, and I said, the center's gone, the pipe's gone. What are we going to do? And they came over, they were horrified. The first thing is, we cannot tell Piero. He will absolutely have a heart attack.
Yeah.
Because all these measurements are precise. And the measurement pipe was gone because we had a lot of volunteers working there. Obviously, someone came along and said, "Well, I need this pipe for something," just unscrewed it and took it away. And we lost the whole thing. So we had to sit there, and we had to do all these calculations trying to find where that pipe should be. And we couldn't tell anybody because it would be like a total crisis.
Sure.
So of course, we called Mother and all of that. And we just sat there and we worked, and we estimated where the center of Matra Mandir should be. The rest of Matra Mandir is built from our estimate.
Oh my God.
So you see, Mother is behind all. There's so many miracles at Matra Mandir. We could tell many of those stories,
Yes.
but that one, it just came to me this morning. I'm looking at this beautiful crystal with the gold, and all of a sudden I see this rusty pipe right there in the middle of the chamber. And I said, "Oh my God!" So these old things, they come back to you. But I mean, the work on Matra Mandir, 37 years, one building, 37 years, and it's still not finished. The lake is coming, the gardens are coming. You were out there the other day planting the garden of the unexpected, and a wonderful thing happened to me too. There was I have this feeling for the gardens, and I always was wondering why Mother didn't have a garden of immortality, because there's so many of these flowers that she named have immortality in their names. There's integral immortality, vital, even immortality, supramental immortality on earth. Can you imagine that flower? That's the straw flower. And so many of these things. And I said, we should have a garden. So I went to Orasil, who's now in the garden crew, and actually they were having a meeting, Matra Mandir meeting, and I just sort of butted in, and they had a pause in the meeting, and I said, we should do the Garden of Immortality. And they all turned and looked at me and kind of rolled their eyes, and then went back to their business. But after Orasil said, we have a place for that garden. She said, when Oroville started in 1968, they had this little round pond. It was between banyan tree and where the structure was going to come. They made this round pond, and they were floating flowers in it. You look at the early photos. So that little pond always stayed there.
Where they now plant flowers.
Now they planted. Well, she was the first one to plant there.
Yeah.
For the 50th birthday, she planted gladiolus, receptivity.
Oh, and it was beautiful.
It was totally beautiful. And then some more came up again this year. And
Yes, I saw them.
then we planted some other, but then we planted, I said, that's the perfect place for the immortality. So then we got the immortality seeds, and we planted that whole thing in immortality. So it came up. It was first immortality. And so now, mixed in there, is immortality. We also, some big sunflowers are there now,
Yes,
if
I
you've
saw
seen
them.
it.
Yes.
So we have that garden, but I always refer to it as the Garden of Immortality, and we have some more seeds coming. of the supramental immortality, and we've got them from Mother's Garden, from the ashram, and because the gladiolas, are not permanent, they're bulbs, and they're really not so
Nature.
suited to this climate.
Can't take the
You
sun.
can't take it, no. And these other annuals that are there will go, but we will keep that as the Garden of Immortality. I mean, sort of spontaneously arisen. But what I thought about that pond there, all these landscape architects, they want to take it out always. And then some people always said, no, that's a historic thing from the beginning. You can't touch it. And so it stayed.
And it's the Garden of Life, actually.
It's in the Garden of Life.
It's in the Garden of Life.
Exactly.
So how do you take it out?
How do you take it out? And then I said to some garden people told me, well, you can't have the Garden of Immortality there because this is the Garden of Life. And I said, haven't you heard of immortal life?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, I mean, what is life? What is life about? And this immortality theme came quite strong to me personally through George Van Brecken. George, who wrote the book on the mother and all that. So George, just before he died, I was in his house, and he said, look, I'm going to die soon, and I have all these books to read. And his shelves were all full, and so he had them stacked on the floor in a sequence. And he said, I'm going, along this, I'm going to read all those. But then he said, I don't have enough time. So he said, I'm coming to Savitri Bhavan, and I'm going to give a lecture every Saturday for 10 Saturdays, because this current research, I have to get it out. So he did. He did that every Saturday. He came, and I went to those lectures. They were fantastic. And then I was going up to Matra Mandir in the morning, and he's coming down the ramp. He's walking down, I'm going up. And I looked at him, I knew it's the end.
He was going.
He was going to go. And I put my hand on his shoulder, and we looked at each other. He went down. A couple of days, he was gone. And then we buried him there in Adventure, in the place. And I went out there a few months ago, and there was a stone. They had put a stone for him, a granite stone. And they had put a line on there from Savitri. And the line was, conscious of immortality, I walk. That was him.
Yeah.
And that was
Yes.
that message, and he did it. And that ever since I've seen that, it stays with me, and that's what we're all doing. I mean, that's it's not a secret in Savitri. It's there everywhere. Sri Aurobindo is telling us, but about that awakening, of the heart to feel the love and oneness.
Yes.
That's to live. And what
Yes,
is that life?
yes.
It's immortality, because Savitri overcomes death, and she even overcomes the false light. After death, you get this thing, well, now we'll live in the light and, be happy. No. Connected to matter, back.
Exactly.
Yeah. And nobody's saved until we're all saved.